Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of Machine Logic. I'm Jill Golden, and this is my partner, Charlie Nadler, and we've got a special guest today. Very excited about a big trend that we are seeing right now with a lot of AI and go-to-market is folks who have really neat ideas and who are tinkering and piloting with tools, but then they get stalled when they actually go to operationalize these initiatives. And so we couldn't be more excited to have Nick Bhavsar joining us. Nick, we've partnered on several projects with him, and he is an outstanding AI go-to-market trainer, consultant, and helps essentially tech and SaaS revenue teams use AI to accelerate their pipeline. And he has a tremendous finger on the pulse of this. And so we wanted to bring Nick into the fold today to join us on Machine Logic. Nick, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. It's good to chat with you again. Thanks, Charlie. It's always good to catch up with y'all. So it's fun trying to keep up with all this crazy stuff that's going on in AI right now. So excited to chat with y'all. I'll give just a quick sort of background on me as well. So yeah, definitely Nick Bhavsar. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, go-to-market consultant. I've been doing kind of sales and marketing, B2B, for, now 25 years or so. So a number of different companies. I cut my teeth at a company called SolarWinds, and then Spiceworks, and a company called LevelSet, and then launched and co-founded a company called Velocity Engine that was in the go-to-market space. So it's been fun to kind of play around in this area. And then more recently, just been all in on AI and really trying to help teams leverage gaining productivity through the various tools. Excited to chat with y'all.
Terrific. Yeah, I know your experience is deep in this area and very exciting. So talk to us then, Nick, about what you're seeing. I know we've had some cross-pollination on several clients and projects, but what else are you hearing when it comes to what companies are up against when they're trying to get AI initiatives up and running and to stick?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jill. So I think part of the we're on this evolution, and different people are on the evolution at different stages as well. So just in the last 6 months, the amount of AI acceleration that's happened has been tremendous. I'd say really since the birth of ChatGPT 3 years ago, the first 2 years, even 2.5 years, were essentially kind of like Google replacements. People were using chat like Google replacement. Go fetch me this information, asking different questions. And it was amazing because it could create, really good generative answers. And then probably in November, December, we started to see this shift where you started to see things like Claude Cowork and Code and all kinds of different, applications start to come up. And so at that point, sort of call it Q1 of this year, kind of mid Q1, we started to see skills and agents and connectors, and people and companies start to use AI beyond just fetch me this information, but actually get some insight from Salesforce or HubSpot or different tools like that. And I think that dramatically changes what's possible with AI. So we started to see that in about Q1, and then in Q2 we started to see, it's just still, we're in Q2 right now, just kind of in the March, April timeframe, started to see people really start to tap into actually building workflows and building agents that can actually perform different tasks. And some of the tools and evolution of the tools have helped a tremendous amount there. Now even Claude, which I'm seeing is a lot more embraced on the B2B side, has functionality like these scheduled tasks where you can actually do something like prepare, a weekly report for me and things like that. So seeing that evolution where people that are non-engineers can now create these different workflows themselves. And then kind of just coming up to speed today, what we're starting to see is people have those individual tasks. They want to deploy them enterprise-wide. They want to start to do these workflows where they have processes that they've been doing, and they want everybody on their team or parts of their team to be able to do this. So it no longer works on your laptop. You have to put this in some cloud infrastructure. So starting to see real adoption from tools like N8N, and Claude has their routine. So I think that's sort of the progression that we've had, just very quickly kind of going from Google replacement of search to workflows, and now trying to get this influence throughout the different organizations.
Cool. Yeah. So with that influence, like you said, people have this idea that they've implemented for themselves, and now, like as you say, they want to take it enterprise or organization wide. The technical component you mentioned, it sounds like now we're getting into, okay, how do I get the band, the team, the department, the wing of this business on here? It sounds like, there are some other players that need to be looped in regarding like how do we actually bring this to life organization wide, and some processes as well, where it's like, hey, this works for me, but now how do we deploy this all around? And it that's a lot of moving parts. So how do you help folks kind of reconcile or triangulate those three things to actually roll it out?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jill. So I think, it's funny when we think about software and software as a service, and that's not, the entire market, but essentially, like, what are people doing all day? They're basically interfacing with some database, whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever the interaction is. They're looking at some data, manipulating some data, and then, using their judgment about creating some other things and then putting it in another database. Like at the end of the day, that's really all we're doing. And you could be, creating a marketing campaign and you send an email out and send ads out and different aspects like that. So I think what's interesting is the old, I call them the old workflow tools of N8N, Make, and tools like that did really well when there was really good structured data and they could move data in and out of these different tools. But as we know, and y'all are really good experts at this, is that data is not always clean. It's just a mess oftentimes. And so this is where AI can benefit from this. It can tap into less structured data. It still needs some structure. It still needs some reliability. But if it's not exactly the same flow, then it can still adjust and it can modify it. So I think what teams are now trying to do is at the macro level, we're trying to look at what the labor is essentially doing. It's taking information from one database, pulling it down, adjusting it or making some judgment calls, and then putting it somewhere else so that it can perform some action. So that's essentially a workflow or an agent or a skill. Like there's lots of different terms for this. And so I think that the really savvy companies are now starting to map that out and say, okay, what is our business? What do we do? And what do we need to do a regular, what do we need to do very often? And let's map all that out, and then let's start to have AI do those functions. And so where it works out well is you sort of systematically, step by step, kind of map out that process and then identify how this could work. So use an example real quick. I just helped a company just last week, and they have a lot of companies have just HR wikis where it's like, what do we have July 4th off? And what's our policy for this? And usually they have those wikis and people can go find them and search for them, but employees, they don't always do that, right? It's some huge document. Where do I find it? It just becomes a problem to get all this information. And so what we did was built a little HR Slack bot. So basically you go to Slack, you type in your message, do we have Veterans Day off, whatever it is. It goes into the Slack bot, and then it goes and queries those various documents and pulls from SharePoint, pulls from different resources, synthesizes that information, and then gives a concise response. And so this can be in near real time, and so your employees don't have to figure this out. It helps the HR team because now they're not sitting there taking triage from different questions of lots of different people all day. They can just go update the document when there's new policies and things that come out. And so it's a very simple workflow, but right away that probably saves 5 to 10 hours a day of somebody going and fetching that information. And the employees feel a lot better about asking that information because sometimes there's confidential ones or things that they don't necessarily want to share. And now they're asking a bot instead of actually asking a person to be able to do that. So some really interesting workflows. But again, the key being mapping out those workflows and understanding what is the process that we have to go through, and then creating essentially a system to be able to do that.
Right on. And yeah, you touch on some things that I know fall squarely in Charlie's world a lot these days. It's that load-bearing but very unglamorous work of data hygiene, data trust, processes, enforcement, which isn't the most sexy part of AI, but is very foundational. Charlie, can you speak a little to that?
Right. Yeah, and Nick, you know this well too. I mean, a lot of the clients we're helping they're under tremendous pressure to deploy AI, right? And for marketing, for sales, for service ops, and they're being pitched constantly of like, hey, what if we could turn all of your operations into AI today? And so it's very tempting. And then where we tend to come in is like, okay, yes, like absolutely, we should be activating. What is the process? Is it documented? How is data being entered? Like all the unsexy stuff Jill talked about. Like, can you trust it? And we have our methodology for kind of snapshotting that and then like diagnosing and fixing it. Are you seeing a similar thing when you're first engaging with clients? I'm curious. Like, are they feeling that pressure, or is it more self-driven? And I'm also wondering, from like kind of a people readiness standpoint, like culturally, like how far along are they on that journey? Like, are they ready to go? Do people need coaxing? Where does that typically look like?
Yeah, so I definitely see it at the executive level and at the board level. We've seen companies that, the board discussion is how do you, increase the productivity of the teams? And that can be very extreme, very rough. It can be, you need to increase the productivity of the team by 50%. Capital is very restricted right now, so it's tricky to try to, do this without raising more capital, but and AI is that ultimate productivity hack, right? And so that's the promise, at least. And so I think that's where there's tremendous demand. Never seen sort of demand like this for an initiative, both from the top-down executive teams, wanting more of that productivity, but then also from the employee side as well. So we're seeing, a fair bit that most employees want to embrace these tools. They want to see, how do they leverage the sort of more execution-oriented aspects of their job so they can be freed up more for the strategy side of the job. So with that comes a tremendous fear as well. So everybody's worried, is this going to take their jobs? Is this going to replace them? So there's a tremendous amount there. But I think very quickly, the savvier companies and employees figure out, look, this is the way the work is going to happen in the future. If you can get on board with it and then get ahead of this, you can take your expertise and do the human aspects that are much more difficult for the AI to do, and create a lot more execution power to be able to go that route. So I feel like I answered one part of your question, then maybe not the other one. So
no, yeah, that's fascinating, and I think the other part. So because your process, I know you're out there, you're kind of doing like listening tours to figure out where people are at. Like, as you've been getting this sort of from the front lines feedback, like where are the biggest gaps that you're seeing so far, where it's like these need to be figured out before these companies can really kind of start activating?
Yeah, so my process typically has like three different flows. So first, just sitting down and doing the assessment. So sitting down with the executive teams, the departments, trying to understand, okay, how is this stuff working? What are teams using? What tools are they using? What do they have challenges with? And right away, we typically see one of three buckets. You see folks that fall into one of these three buckets. The sort of most advanced folks, that usually the engineers, the product folks, they're doing coding, agentic coding now. They're leveraging the latest tools. They know about, recent updates and models, and they don't frankly need help. Like, they're off to the races. They're leveraging things. They get best practices from each other and things like that. But that within most organizations, they're off to the races. Then you have a sort of tier in the middle that's, sort of call it the excited and productive, that are starting to do things with these tools. And what's interesting is, we're essentially kind of moving more towards engineering-like motions for people that are not engineers, right? And so these workflows and agents and skills, these are all pretty technical terms, but now the capability to be able to do these things is now possible. And so you've got that group in the middle, and they want to know, what the latest skills are, what's approved from their organization, how do they get access to different databases. And they're pushing very aggressively to get more instrumentation, more access to these different tools. And both the opportunity and the big challenge before those folks is, because they're not engineers, they don't think about things like security necessarily, or data hygiene, and some of that back-end infrastructure that's required to be able to do things at scale. And sure, you can whip up a little, prototype to do something kind of cute, but when you're trying to do it across your organization for, tens or hundreds of people, it really needs to be well thought out and done in a more robust way. And then you have that final group that's sort of just, deer in the headlights. They're like, I'm still using chat as a Google replacement or as a search replacement. And so they're very interested as well. And getting them on board typically requires some training. It's like, get access to your email, get access to your calendar, get access to your project management solutions. And so that's kind of what we're seeing is that too often people lump all of these different three cohorts of people together. And I think that's a mistake. Like what happens is, if the engineer, we'll call it tier 1, 2, and 3, right? If the engineer's 3 and the newbie's sort of 1, if you put the two of them together and they're trying to learn from each other, the engineer's frustrated because they're like, they already know all this stuff. And the tier 1 person is freaking out because they're like, they're looking at code and they're looking at all these like advanced things that they don't understand. And so one thing that I've often recommended for teams is the traditional way we think about this is group marketing, group sales, group customer success, and then do the trainings and kind of help them figure things out. But you have people at different extremes within that. And so I think a better way to do this is group the people in their sort of maturity around AI and then do that training. So essentially the three aspects are essentially that assessment. Get a good assessment of where you're at, where your maturity's at. 2 is figure out how to do training. So each of those teams, and this is not a one-time thing, these tools are advancing so incredibly fast, you have to continue to do more and more of that training. And then the third is start to really go department by department and figure out those workflows. What are those repeatable tasks that you're doing? And there's 2 phases of that. Can we automate and agentify some of the existing workflows and processes? And then the other part is, what could we unlock? What is something that we could never ever do, but now with AI we could potentially do that? So that tends to move towards product a little bit, but we're starting to see companies really map this out. And so just some of the use cases we talked about, the Slack use case, meeting prep for sales organizations is huge. So having a bot go off and research who you're meeting with, what happened with the company recently, thinking through if there's any implications of what could happen or what would happen for that first meeting, trying to identify other stakeholders to a meeting. These are all things that have immediate revenue impact. And AI doesn't necessarily do it perfectly, but it can assist quite a bit. So that's a big workflow. And there's great tools as well. I think we're at such an interesting phase. So tools like Gong and Chorus and others that do meeting recording, that's a very, very powerful area as well. And so I think what everyone's trying to figure out is this going to be decentralized in that we're going to have hundreds of different tools, kind of how it's been in the past, and they're all kind of talking to each other and talking through CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce, or is it going to be more centralized where you have tools like Claude that are integrated and that are working through all these different aspects? So I don't know exactly where that's going to land, but that's absolutely the holy grail of where companies, and there's tremendous demand to get there right now. They want their employees to have really well thought out, prep before they meet with their clients. They want the follow up to follow, MedPick and other structured sales processes. They want to be able to look across and do real time, close win or close loss analysis, so that they can better have feedback for their employees and get that information out to product teams. So we're seeing all of this take shape extremely quickly, and I'm sort of watching and trying to figure out, are vendors going to step in and take this? Because right now the vendors are not there. The people are having to figure this out for themselves. And some of the vendors are moving very quickly, but we haven't yet seen that immediate adoption for a lot of these solutions. And that's essentially what everybody's trying to figure out right now is how do I take the labor expense and then move that into agentic workflows.
It's interesting how much I think this puts a spotlight on like management, like competent management, because everything you just talked about, like prepping for meetings, analyzing deals, using recordings, it's like that only works if everyone's doing it. Mm-hmm. In equal measure. Like if you're recording your meetings and I'm not, and Jill does it half the time, and it's like AI can so easily spit out something that sounds smart and is missing the point completely because like it's only getting a slice. Yeah. You know what I mean? So in one way, it's like AI is helping these companies like do so much more quicker, but it's creating new work. I mean, and it's essential work, but it's work of like, okay, what is this process and how do we make sure everyone's actually doing it? Otherwise, we're scaling inaccuracies.
Right.
Yeah, it's what operational weaknesses is this exposing now. As we layer in AI to what we're doing, it's like, oops, oh, got to tighten that up, or oh, that's a mess, right? So it's real work, but it's meaningful and not something that another AI tool can solve, right?
Right,
To Charlie's
right.
point, like that's real work people have to do.
It absolutely, and it starts to highlight, sort of the holy grail here, in my opinion, for some of this is you have some centralized database. Could be Salesforce, could be HubSpot, could be whatever the various tools are, and you have these agents that are. It's one thing to automate something like at the end of a gong call, you automate it and take the summary and then send it out. No big deal. Like it's somewhat even better, stick it in Salesforce and fill your fields in so that a sales rep's not having to do that. To your point, maybe you get better adoption that way, and that the AI always does it, whereas a sales rep sometimes does it, right? So that's even better. But I think the real unlock is how do these different workflows and systems talk to each other? So how do we have that occur? And then immediately the product marketing bot goes off and says it's in real time seeing a trend that's occurring because a new competitor is starting to come up. And then that information makes it over to engineering and says, this competitor is touting this feature that we don't have, and we need to get this into our development in real time. And then that new product feature makes it into the customer success stories and gets release notes and things like that pumped out. Like this holy grail of the systems all working in near real time is, I think, what so many companies are trying to strive for. And we talk a lot about this. What is the first $1 trillion company with 3 people or 1 person or something like that? If you think about it, that's what this is doing. The systems are all talking to each other in real time, passing information back and forth, making those decisions. So I think we're a ways away from that. But the first step is taking sort of the labor and agentifying it and putting these processes in place, and then starting to step back and having an overarching, essentially, management layer saying, are we doing all this? Do we need to be doing all this? Can we cut some of this out? What's the most effective way for us to do this? So really exciting and terrifying at the same time when we're thinking about all this.
As we kind of wrap up here, I'm curious, like if you're a company who's kind of at that inflection point where it's like, all right, we've been piloting, it's time to take this seriously and really operationalize it across the enterprise. What thoughts or what advice do you have for those folks as far as like, not only like kind of what to expect as they're getting started, but like how should they think about what kind of progress this is going to make and how to measure that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the old rules of business don't fall apart here. Like you just got to start by saying, like, that's where a good assessment of what's the real challenge for the teams, what's preventing them from hitting their goals, and then it almost always comes back to some amount of training and helping the teams be more productive, and then trying to identify a few of those processes or workflows, prioritizing them, trying to have some business impact tied to them. So if it's things like, having your automation that could have, I just talked to a client the other day and they'd mentioned their sales team's extremely frustrated because they spend a good 8 to 10 hours of non-selling time. So whether that's updating Salesforce or summarizing calls and trying to get insights or internal meetings that they've got. And so like you can't have 0 of that. You obviously, sales is part of the rest of the organization, but 8 to 10 hours of non-selling time, like if you can cut that in half and give yourself 4 hours of selling time, that's a meaningful impact, right? It immediately hits the bottom line. So I think thinking about these, we're not just in the business of agentifying and creating workflows. We're in the business of hitting revenue goals and hitting, milestones. And so, really sitting down and saying, what are the bottlenecks to hitting those goals? The same way we do with employees when you're thinking about OKRs for the quarter, for the year. I think really getting a good understanding of what those bottlenecks are, and then, not trying to solve all of it at once, but just chipping away at it and saying, okay, let's try this area, let's build out a workflow, let's see if we can get it automated. The other thing is that this automation can be done in such a way where it's, it's not bad to prototype something, get it working on your computer for an individual person, and then get it working where it works in the cloud for more people, and then get engineering involved where it goes through more of a robust security audit and it's built for more enterprise scale. So this is not wave your hand, wave your magic wand AI that it's just going to fix a bunch of these things. There's real work that has to happen, but it can also, dramatically improve the productivity for those teams. So I think that's the fun part here.
It is, yeah, because to your point, AI is being marketed as instant transformation, but for most businesses, that is just not the reality. And early progress looks like a lot of the use cases that you shared, and reduction of manual effort, and just incremental efficiency gains. And as our respective organizations are a testament to that, people need help getting there. So we really appreciate your perspective on a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun to catch up with y'all. So I appreciate the invite and look forward to hearing more from y'all as well.
Awesome. Hey, if you're up for this again, you touched on some things that I think are worth more a deeper dive. Additional use cases as they bubble up in each of our respective works, like governance, prioritization, the change management component. Because that's the awareness about it isn't the gap anymore. It's the operational readiness, and that's the part no one should skip. So we'd love to do a deeper dive on some of those things with you in the future, Nick.
Let's do it. That sounds great, Jill. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody.